Hello and welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is American Ben. The Mandalorian has been out for well over 24 hours by now, and I hope that for those of you who have seen it, the first episode didn't make you want to claw your eyes out. Something that series star Pedro Pascal knows a little something about. Anyway, as many of you know, Mandalorians were a people who hailed from the planet Mandalore, where arose a warrior culture that produced some of the galaxy's most legendary mercenaries and bounty hunters. You know, you think about the advanced ships the Mandalorians create and their super strong iron called Beskar, and you realize Mandalore is basically a sociopathic Wakanda. They're a secluded warrior culture rife with advanced technology, and instead of using such technology for the good of the world or galaxy in this case, they use it for conquest and genocide. Yep, they've killed a lot of people. They've killed a lot of everything, actually. But what we're really here for today is to speak about their ships, as they make and use some really impressive ones. So last time we did their starfighters, and this time we are going to look at their warships, referring to their non-starfighter class, usually bigger sized attack ships, whether battleships, cruisers, assault ships, and so on. And of course, any ship they have either produced or used throughout their history is game for this list. The first ship we are going to look at is the Crusader class Corvette, a Mandalorian produced ship that's actually not made by Mandal Motors but Mandal Hypernautics, a ship and tank manufacturing organization on Mandalore. The Crusader, named for the Mandalorian Crusaders, an ancient group of sword-wielding Mandalorians, was designed to combat starfighters and bombers, and as such, it was as heavily armed as it could be while still being somewhat fast and agile. These characteristics made the Crusader class one of the more expensive Mandalorian ships for its size. The ship possessed an advanced point-defensed weapon system that consisted of an array of cannons that were capable of shooting down enemy ships, as well as enemy missiles and torpedoes. Mandal Hypernautics introduced the ship in the years following the Clone Wars, and they sold two to the Galactic Empire as a test run. When ultimately the Empire decided not to purchase any more after the test run, Mandal Hypernautics began to sell the ship more widely, including to the Mandalorians themselves. The Firespray 31 class patrol and attack craft, which coincidentally was the nickname for my ex-girlfriend when she was angry at me, was a patrol ship made by Quat Systems Engineering. A custom version of the ship, named Slave 1, was used by wannabe Mandalorians Jango and Boba Fett during their journeys. The Firespray was often used by Mandalorians to guard important points of interest. The ship contained holding cells within it for the purpose of jailing and transporting all sorts of creatures. Oh, and of course, while boasting good speed and maneuverability, the ship was also armed with two laser cannons, a pair of warhead launchers each equipped with 5 concussion missiles, and a tractor beam projector. The reason I chose to include this smaller patrol ship among the warships is twofold. One, the ship often did find itself in space combat as it was used to intercept smugglers and other ships engaged in illicit activity, and two, I don't have anywhere else to put it, and this video was short enough that I could fit it in. The Jehavir type assault ship, the pronunciation of which I just butchered like it was a Tusken Raider and I was a terrible actor cast in a poorly written movie, was a ship flown by the Neo Crusaders, a group that arose from the original Crusaders that would go on to conquer systems across the galaxy before being stopped by the Jedi. Armed with medium double turbo lasers, heavy ion cannons, and super heavy concussion missile launchers, the ship always had its guns charged and ready to fire, including when traveling in hyperspace, so that if needed it could engage enemies immediately after arriving at a destination. The Jehavir, its name coming from the Mandalorian word for ambush, could deploy soldiers quickly as well, as it had no landing bay and instead had airlocks that projected troops towards other ships for boarding operations. The Calda B type Dreadnought, a name derived from the Mandalorian word for ruthless, which itself means lacking a female Supreme Court judge, was a large capital ship used by the Mandalorians, notably during the Mandalorian Wars. The ship was armed with 5 medium double turbo laser batteries, 2 point defense triple laser cannon batteries, 2 super heavy concussion missile batteries, and 2 tractor beam batteries. Coming in at almost 4,500 feet long, the Calda B Dreadnought would house 128 Devob type starfighters, 8 Shadler type troop ships, some Basilisk war droids, various other support craft, 30,000 troops, 10,000 crew, 45,000 tons of cargo, and 5 years worth of consumables, or 2 weeks worth if Hutts were aboard. The ship was actually originally designed and built by the Fenelar, an ancient sentient species from the planet Fennel, but the Mandalorians stole the ships and designs and later would manufacture them themselves. The Fenelar didn't complain though, mostly because the Mandalorians exterminated them. As an integral part of the Mandalorian fleet during the Mandalorian Wars, the Mandalorians would often use this ship for planetary bombardment. Next up, we have the Calda B class battleship, named after the capital city of Mandalore. The Calda B class was a battleship designed by Mandal Hypernautics and manufactured by both Mandal Hypernautics and Mandal Motors. Coming in at just under 3,300 feet, the ship was significantly smaller than the Candosi-type Dreadnought, but could still carry a complement of 36 starfighters, a couple small shuttles and light freighters, 6,000 crew, 1,000 passengers, and 20,000 tons of cargo. The Calda B class was also armed with 25 heavy turbo lasers, 15 heavy ion cannons, 2 mass driver missile launcher batteries with 10 missiles each, 5 heavy tractor beams, and a shield leecher weapon which could leech energy from enemy shields to power its own weapon and shield systems. The Calda B class was powerful enough to compete with an Imperial-class Star Destroyer, despite being much smaller. Mandalorians used this ship during the Galactic Civil War, and additionally the Zan Consortium were able to manufacture and use it after extorting the plans for the ship from Mandal Hypernautics. The Pyramid-type battleship, the name derived from the Mandalorian word for killer or assassin, was a battleship used by the Mandalorian Crusaders and later the Mandalorian Neo-Crusaders during the Mandalorian Wars, where the ship was often seen being supported by the Jahavier-type assault ships. The Pyramid-type battleship resembled the Basilisk war droids in appearance, and that's because the ship was originally designed and manufactured by the Basiliskans, an intelligent lizard species native to the planet Basilisk. The Mandalorians stole this design as well and eventually updated the Pyramid to have a less organic makeup. Don't worry though, the Mandalorians did not exterminate the Basiliskans after conquering them. Nope, instead they enslaved and mounted them and used them as their personal war dragons. The Basiliskans might have been a highly intelligent and dignified species, but I kind of feel like the unofficial rule is, if you're not bipedal, you're pretty much rideable. Anyway, back to the ship. Just as the Mandalorians often used the Basiliskans for ground assaults, so too did they often use the Pyramid for ground-level attacks. The Mandalorian Cruiser is not a ship we know much about, as it's only briefly mentioned throughout Star Wars history books. We do know that it was a warship that was used by the Mandalorians during the Great Galactic War, a galaxy-wide war between the Sith Empire and Galactic Republic that took place in the mid-3600s BBY, a few hundred years after the Mandalorian Wars. The Mandalorians famously used this ship as part of the blockade of the Hydian Way, which took place near the end of the conflict and resulted in a major supply and economic crisis for the Galactic Republic. Again, we can't be sure about most of the details concerning this ship, but most Star Wars historians seem to think the ship was outfitted with an assortment of turbo laser batteries among a plethora of other weapons. I've also seen an estimate putting the ship at about 4,000 feet long, but I'm not sure there's any veracity to that claim. The Mandalorian Warship was a battleship used by the Neo-Crusaders during the Mandalorian Wars. The design of this ship might be familiar to you, as it was dagger-shaped just like the latter Star Wars destroyers, and indeed many people believe that the Mandalorian Warship was the first ship to have this design, and it was most certainly the basis for at least the Venator-class Star Destroyer that would come thousands of years later. The ship was armed with 14 dual turbo laser turrets and an anti-capital ship missile launcher. The Terek-type gunship, from the Mandalorian word for pitiless, was a 59-foot-long fast-attack gunship, also used by the Mandalorian Neo-Crusaders during the Mandalorian Wars. Armed with double laser cannons, large groups of Terek-type gunships would break through enemy lines and use their speed to quickly surround capital ships. The ship was most notably used during the Battle of Cathar, a battle during the Mandalorian Wars between the Neo-Crusaders and the Cathar, a humanoid feline species. Good news here, despite a decisive victory, the Mandalorians did not wipe out the Cathar. Let the record show at least a handful were left alive. And bipedal as the Cathar were, the Mandalorians didn't try to ride them into battle. I think. The Venator-class Star Destroyer was an attack cruiser designed by Quat Drive Yards, and most famously used by the Galactic Republic and Galactic Empire during the Clone Wars. The ship was over 3,700 feet long, not the longest capital ship out there, but one of the largest capable of atmospheric operations. The ship was designed for ship-to-ship combat and was armed with 8 dual DBY-827 heavy turbo laser turrets, 2 medium dual turbo laser cannons, 52-point defense dual laser cannons, 4 heavy proton torpedo launchers, 6 heavy tractor beam projectors, numerous deck guns, and another beam weapon. Despite its heavy armament, the Venator-class Star Destroyer was built to serve multiple roles, such as a starfighter carrier, military transport, or battleship escort. The ship was capable of carrying a complement of 192 Alpha-3 Nimbus-class V-wing starfighters, 192 Eta-2 Actis-class light interceptors, 36 ARC-170 starfighters, and an assortment of other starfighters, walkers, shuttles, and vehicles of all sorts. The ship was fast as well, but because it wasn't the most self-sufficient ship, it depended heavily on supply lines during long-range campaigns. So as we said, the Venator-class Star Destroyer was a ship used by both the Galactic Republic and Galactic Empire during the era of the Clone Wars. But as time went on, the ship eventually became antiquated, and as newer classes of Star Destroyers became more popular, Venator-class ones ended up in the hands of all sorts of groups. And during the Galactic Civil War, the Mandalorians had one in their possession, but it ended up being destroyed during a battle with the Zan Consortium above Mandalore. Okay, well that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you are excited for the Mandalorian series. I know I am. With how high quality so many series on these streaming websites are, it must be good and will be a big disappointment if it isn't. Anyways, don't forget to like this video, comment down below, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell. For now, my name is American Ben, and I'll catch you next time. Generation Films, peace.